Hi, I'm Lydia Grey in Orange, Massachusetts, and you can see that I'm standing in what is really a very shady place. We probably get 4 or 5 hours of sunlight a day, but I've discovered that it is possible to use a solar dehydrator here to preserve mainly fruits. I think the original preserving technique was dehydration, and you think of beans. I grew these beans in my garden, and they are wonderful. And every year I seem to grow more dried beans. The flavor is incomparable to what you buy at the store. And of course, corn is another food that is naturally dried in the garden. And these come from Ricky at Seeds of Solidarity Farm. I've always wanted to kind of expand my repertoire of dried food, and for years I looked at plans online for solar dehydrators, and there are wonderful plans, and there's so many of them, but they're complicated, and I have a very busy life. I said, I never will have time to make that. And then I looked around and I found this very simple cold frame. This is rough cut lumber. This is an old storm window, and I said, let's see if I can use that. So I put it together. I had some metal roofing that was just kicking around. I put that on the bottom to provide a reflective surface, and then I put a couple of scrap pieces of 2x4s. I think most of us have those kicking around too, on their sides. And then I found a couple of screens that I put raised up on those 2x4s. And the only thing to remember about that is if they're plastic screens, you're good to go. But if it's a metal screen, the metal can give a taste to the food. So in that case, you want to put a layer of cheesecloth over the metal so that it doesn't pick up the flavor from the metal. And so I've started to dry tomatoes, and the classic Principe Borghese, as well as the all-popular Sun Gold. And they both dried up beautifully, and they taste like the essence of summer, especially in the wintertime. And then from there I ended up drying mulberries. I have a mulberry tree that grew very quickly, and I don't really care for the fruit fresh, but dried, they're like really delicious raisins. Grapes, seedless grapes from my grapevine. Super delicious. And then this is really an acquired taste, but I like it. These are dried black currants. Very strong flavored, but they really work in recipes with, a recipe that you would use raisins in, but expect it to be more strongly flavored. You'll have to try it and see if you like it. I put the fruits in with just as is, nothing on them. The sun-dried tomatoes I cut in half and sprinkle them with salt, and that helps the dehydration process and adds a little bit of flavor. How do you know when they're done, when they're ready? Well, keep checking, and I kind of err on the side of being too dry rather than not dry enough. Some of my mulberries this year that I dried when it was so hot are a little bit crispy, but they're still good. After they've dried, you taste them and you feel them, and you get a sense of, okay, this is really pretty dry. And some people put their sun-dried tomatoes in olive oil. I don't. Usually, if I'm going to cook with them, I soak them in a little warm water for half an hour or so before I use them. And the other thing that I do, that I recommend, is I put them in jars and I keep them in the refrigerator. And that's kind of a little bit of extra insurance. If there is a little bit of moisture in there, that ordinarily prevents them from going moldy. I've never had any mold with any of them. So that is my story with how to do solar dehydration with found materials in a garden where I get 4 or 5 hours of sunlight.